I'm always disappointed that that data and performance is not kind of is more popular, because it's actually kind of one of the most important committees we have. But I think we're going to have a great session. So look forward to getting started. Why don't you, Billy, put up the, if you want to put up the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
If you want to go to the agenda.
Yes. Let's see.
So here's how I would propose that we spend our time today. And by the way, I'm subbing for our two tremendous committee chairs. We got very unlucky. One of them is Chris D. Pentima, who heads up the Connecticut Business and Industry Association, who's having his board meeting right this moment. And the other is Maggie Hulse, who is a senior executive at Indeed. And they're having their main industry conference right now where she's presenting. So, but they are both really excited about leading this committee. So I thought what we would do is kind of give some very brief updates on the initiatives that are happening as a part of this committee. And just to kind of list them out, that we have, we're building out a career portal for all Connecticut people to be able to kind of understand and explore careers and be able to kind of get connected to resources to help them with their career planning and with job opportunities ultimately. Second initiative is what we call the Credential Registry, where we're pulling together all of the credentials that one can earn in the state of Connecticut into with the work of the Office of Higher Ed here and the partnership of the New England Board of Higher Education. So we will now have, as a part of our online systems, one single place where people can sort through all the different credentials. The third is we're building out longitudinal data systems called P20Win, and we'll get an update on the progress of the work going on there. This is what enables us to take a data-driven view of how people are progressing through the various education and workforce programs and what the outcomes are. Fourthly, we're going to talk about, and this is going to be the major area for discussion, is what kind of data and performance metrics do we need to be able to really get our arms around the success or lack thereof of all of our Governor's Workforce Council activities, but also the broader kind of workforce and employment system in Connecticut. And then, so those are kind of, the main areas. We'll give short updates, and then we'll have a discussion around the data and performance dashboards. And please feel free, as people are presenting these initiatives, to ask any kind of questions or offer any kind of suggestions or ideas. So Ray, you want to take it away in talking about My Connecticut Career?
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. So yeah, as Mark mentioned, that we are looking to create a portal tool for a job seeker. And basically what we're looking to do is create a tool that streamlines, integrates, all the great programs that we have throughout the state and directing people to those resources. And as you may have recalled, if you were part of the session last quarter, we did dive into this a little bit, and we are creating what's called an MVP, which is minimal viable product. Really, trying to get a landing page plus these other items out here. Having a profile for yourself, connecting people with other people to help them with their careers, and identifying career paths for them, as well as find education and training that's appropriate for where they're looking to go. And then also, of course, you can't have a jobs page without identifying some jobs and job boards that will be helpful for you. And so we did create a, kind of our first round of development. We did create a MVP. And where we are now, after, a lot of user feedback and kind of strategically thinking of how we want to approach a production go live, What we're looking to do right now is just build out these pages a little bit more. Just enhancing the functionality a little bit, and prior to a go live, out to the state. So that's a little bit where we are right now in development. But we had a working prototype that we're now enhancing, and we're looking forward to bringing that out to kind of again larger audiences with user testing and production deployment likely by the end of the year. Maybe we can switch to the next slide. Just talk about the roadmap quick. So you can see, a few of the items that we're looking at to, build out in the immediate term. Obviously, prioritize additional content. We're kind of looking for both, kind of breadth and depth, just making sure that we're connecting to more, more resources for more people, and enhancing what we have a dashboard experience as well with a it's the myCT initiative, and plug it into that. We have some functionality with the checklist, and a few areas that we're going to look for is we certainly do have supports and direction to growing industries. We really want to get that functionality deeper. So early next year, that's a lot of what we're going to be focused on. Plus, we're working across the board. Maybe just to highlight a few things across the board for both state of Connecticut initiatives, as well as adjusting to programs. Great programs like Career Connect and other things such as Credential Registry come up that we want to adjust to, making sure that this portal is complementary to those programs, as they're coming up, and making sure that people have a comprehensive way to get to those resources as well. So we're always looking for kind of what's next on for resources for the residents of Connecticut, and so we'll be looking forward to giving you another update in the next quarter's Governing Workforce Council. But I'll pause there and see if there's any questions on where we are, what we're doing.
Questions for Ray? Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Let's move next to Credential Registry. And is Sean here?
I am here.
Welcome, Sean.
Hi. So as Mark was mentioning, the Credential Registry is an effort to collect all the credential information offered by various educational facilities across the state. We have just put some slides together really quick here. We were already doing this at OHE, at the Office of Higher Ed, for the CSCUs, for UConn, for the independent institutions and private career schools. And so our efforts in terms of launching this included kind of socializing each one of these groups with the understanding of what the Credential Registry is, how it's different from the work that we were previously doing, and kind of some of the expectations about some of the data elements that need to be reported for each credential. We had a launch earlier this year. We worked with each one of these, and we provided training in terms of how to use our new system to update the information that was in there. Simultaneously, with the launch of the Credential Registry was a new system. So each one of these groups had to get some understanding about how to interact with the new system and how to update the information in there. And we also had some data migration happening. So so a lot of the initial efforts involved kind of checking over to make sure that the migration happened properly and correcting any migration issues that happened, along with trying to update the new information. Post-launch, which is where we're at now, includes kind of monitoring the information that was in there and providing additional training to each one of these groups. We are our interaction with the CSCU is a little different. The state universities are kind of interacting the same way as UConn and the independents are. We have CT State that's coming up, and so I've been working closely with them over there in terms of how to get the new programs into the registry as well too. And in addition, so besides just working on getting the information in here, we've also just started building connections that we've had previously One is with the CT Department of Labor. And then we are close to finishing up our API with the Credential engine so that we can export information over there as well. Go to the next slide. So this is just some lessons learned. I wouldn't go into these in too much detail, but things that worked well for us, including having some legislative mandates, so kind of compelled institutions and schools to do it. We have a new database system that's flexible, that allowed for the collection of the data that we needed. There is some institutional hesitancy around providing some of the credential information. I think some of it may be around, where can they find the best information? Things like, industry codes that their educational programs would lead to, or what exactly are the tuition rates for each of the educational programs, or some of the issues that we're working through right now. Being readily available for support is important. The system that we're using now is very interoperable, so that it can communicate through a variety of different mediums, including having an SFTP or an API so that we can push information or digest information in. And we have a long runway for gradual adoption, which I think this needs to get in place by 2014. So, sorry, 2024. So we have a little bit of time. Next slide. So we're looking to continue to expand our data collection efforts. I have been working with the Department of Labor to correctly identify which educational programs are also part of the ETPL, and then also to collect information for educational programs that OHE does not approve, to get the information populated there. And then I also am working to see if I can get information about community action agencies and how I could get that information in there.
So Sean, I have a quick question for you.
Yes.
In terms of reporting on where we are now. So it seems like you more or less have the college data, and now you're looking to kind of expand it out to other types of credentials.
Well, it's on levels, right? So we have some college data. So we have a minimum data policy of data elements that we want for each of the credentials. We have a certain subset. So we have information on all the credentials, but we don't have all the information on all of the credentials. So what we're working through now is to get the additional information for each of the credentials from the institutions.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. Okay, well, thank
Sean,
you for
this
your
is
work
Joe
on it.
Smilowski. Just a quick question. I was wondering to what degree you're trying to rationalize these credentials or certifications. A particular, let's say, private career school may offer a particular program, but it may not necessarily be aligned with what you would find on a national level. And I was just wondering, are you simply taking what the institutions are providing to you, or are you trying to scrub and align these certificates also?
So our office also has regulatory oversight over the private career schools and the independent colleges and universities. So, and we have various statutes and regulations that determine if a educational program at a private career school, if we can authorize that or not. So what's getting populated in the registry right now are educational programs that have been authorized within the state. I don't know if that answers your question, Joe.
So what you're saying is you are doing vetting of these certificates as you're going through this process.
Correct. There is some vetting process for each one of these credentials that's being in the registry.
Thank you.
Any other questions? The last thing I want to say is we're working on creating an enhanced credential registry reporting tool. We have something right now. The database that we're using has some limited reporting capabilities. So we're looking to see if we can get something a little more robust that can integrate with what Ray is doing. my career,
Great.
myCT career.
Thank you, Sean.
Thanks.
Building this technology is not easy, but we are intent on doing it. Scott, can you talk about the work you're doing in terms of P20 Win and integrating our data systems in Connecticut?
Yeah, sorry, just take a second to unmute. So I know, I think several people on the call are familiar with this, and if you're not, please don't hesitate to ask questions. But this is a longer term effort that the state's put together across, as you can see in the slide, several different agencies to be able to find ways to make connections across different agency data to provide information about the outcomes for individuals that are navigating a variety of different state programs or services. So I think just to use an example from earlier, if you look at the Career Connect program, it's run through Office of Workforce Strategy. How would we figure out if somebody who went through one of those, found work in the type of occupation or industry that they're looking for? Did it help, them alleviate their reliance on state benefits or some other program like that? And that we can only do that by linking together across different agencies. And we have in Connecticut a state longitudinal data system, P20 Win, which is the framework that allows us to do that. So as of last week, we've got 11 agencies that have signed on to be, you can go back, sorry, whoever's clicking, signed on to be part of the system. And that's giving us hopefully a good broad view of both the workforce development system, but also some of the other programs and services that people rely on. We know, for instance, housing instability is an impediment to people and their ability to find and retain and secure work. And so we're able to connect data, not just from education workforce programs, but also to health and human services to be able to sort of give a more holistic look for individuals as they navigate these different groups. So the list of state agencies is here. It doesn't cover everything, but it does cover a lot of what I think the Workforce Council's focused on. I'm going to go to the next slide. Those agencies come together to kind of develop a collective learning agenda that's the priority topics and questions. You can think of this like burning questions for those agencies. So we've pulled together the 5 topics here. The agencies revisit this periodically, ideally every year, sort of to fine tune and calibrate it. So the 5 topics here, I think, are pretty squarely in line with the kinds of things that the Workforce Council focuses on. As of last year, Chief Workforce Officer is also on the executive board that helps set this agenda. So I think the council itself is able to kind of directly influence the topics and priorities. And these help the agencies, prioritize requests for data as they come through. They help make sure that we're sort of in alignment with the GWC priorities, and it helps with identifying and looking for opportunities to develop partnerships and other relationships with folks who can help do some of this analysis. And then I think there's one more slide. Oh, just to give sort of a take on where things stand for it. So this is a dashboard that was as of about a week ago that covers where different requests are in the process. System operates through requests, so somebody has to sort of ask for data, and if it's approved by the agencies that have oversight for that data, the data is pulled together and linked to facilitate that request. So we've got 16 requests in flight to varying degrees right now. About half of them are under review. A few of them are going through the process of linking and matching the data, and a handful are being analyzed. And they line up with the topics in the learning agenda in the way you can see on the right-hand side. So there's a lot of focus on workforce, and then a handful looking at college and career success, student readiness, primarily in the K-12 system, financial aid, and barriers or impediments to success, the different types of challenges that folks face trying to navigate workforce system and other types of services. So I think in the remainder of this, we'll kind of go through ways in which this is hopefully a support to developing better insights about the ability of workforce programs to benefit residents in the state. But just so if you are not aware, for folks to have a rough sense of what this resource is designed to do, and then if there's questions about it, please don't hesitate to ask. And I know a few of the, again, several of the individuals from agencies are in this. I see Jan from the state colleges and universities, Jen Witness from independent colleges. Sean is not our designee from Office of Higher Education, but is an honorary point person for it. And so those agencies are critical to the success of this venture, and Office of Workforce Strategy. We're grateful for the kind of active engagement with them.
Questions for Scott? Or comments? What I'm going to suggest, Billy, if we could kind of go back to the agenda slide to frame up the discussion that we're going to be moving into now. So what I'd like to do is kind of open this up, and there are a few slides that Billy and Jonathan can take us through, but I'd really like to kind of think about the work of this committee in terms of establishing data and performance metrics and dashboards or ways of reporting on this in at least three different broad ways. One is we have 19 strategic initiatives in our GWC plan. And a lot of those initiatives are really around different projects that we're launching. So they really are involved in, kind of what is our progress in completing a particular project. A second category is what are the outcomes of specific programs that we're running? Career Connect being a great example, okay? 60 some odd million is going to be spent directly on those programs. Another 24 million on the work with Good Jobs Challenge and such. How should we think about outcomes for that? And then the third broad category is beyond looking at individual programs. In the totality, are we having any impact? Are we kind of positively influencing, kind of important statewide measures on education, employment, workforce development? So with that, why don't we kind of, before we kind of jump into, there's slides that can talk a little bit about, especially these last two bullet points, how to look at program outcomes or thinking about, general performance measures. Why don't we just open it up for comments and suggestions or thoughts that people have on what we should be thinking about here?
Mark, this is Joe. I would just offer one comment that as we design the dashboard and the various metrics that you're measuring, is that we don't overcomplicate it, and if possible to say or to boil these things down to one or two key metrics that really tell the story, as opposed to trying to understand every specific thing that might be going on. I don't know if that makes sense, but sometimes we can get so confused with the amount of metrics and data that we lose sight of whether we're making progress on the overall mission.
It's a really great point, Joe. Which, if people, buy into that, then a good follow-up question would be, if we're looking at kind of, the overall kind of, statewide, kind of population and such, what would be candidates for what are a few of the most important kind of metrics that we should be kind of capturing at that level, and then also even, in terms of the job training programs, what are the most kind of important metrics?
Mark, this isn't necessarily a metric, but I do think we need to think about the populations that we care about. That's maybe that's the wrong word, care about, but the populations that are important to us. And through the course of the meeting today, there were a number of, we'll say, groups that were described, and one was, we'll say, non-English speaking people that are returning from the justice system, a variety of other groups, and then if we can think about those populations, then what are we trying to measure with those particular groups? Sometimes I think we can jump to the metric and not necessarily think about the groups that we need to understand if we're making an impact.
Great point, Joe. Really important to kind of disaggregate data by populations. Other people, other points?
I mean, this is Jen from CCIC. I mean, this is pretty obvious, but I mean, completion rates and a match with labor unemployment, you know.
That's great. I actually have Jen, thank you for joining this conversation. I have a question on the education side. You know, to Joe's point around trying to think about a few kind of key metrics. I know that in Connecticut statute, there is a goal that 70% of Connecticut residents have post-secondary credentials. And it's also a national stat that some, you know, organizations nationally kind of track. Do you have any viewpoints about whether that's that or something like it is kind of like the right type of metric? Not to put you on the spot, Jen, but I'm sure you think about these things a lot.
I mean, I look at that chart a lot. I think what's unique and important about Connecticut is that we are a highly educated state, but the attainment gap, the gap between underrepresented minorities and their attainment rates, right, is between their rates and white and Asian Americans, it's the largest gap in the country. So what I think is important about our attainment rate is to make sure that we're making sure that everyone is having access to post-secondary, right? And not just some, because somebody on the call earlier today, I think Terrence mentioned the demographic changes that are happening in the Northeast and the declining population of college-going students, but actually the population is becoming more diverse, and we need to make sure to reach everybody.
It's a really great point. In fact, I've talked with our colleagues in Rhode Island, and they now track at a high school level something they call their kind of diploma plus, which is, or their post-secondary index, where they track the percentage of students that have engaged in any kind of post-secondary educational activity or career credentials, whatever, while in high school, which is a really interesting kind of, you know, and that's a stat that they put a lot of attention on in Rhode Island. So,
yeah, I wanted to add to what Jen was saying is
Go ahead,
that
Jen.
sometimes averages in Connecticut fake you out. And that getting back to the point that I made earlier about, you know, focusing on particular groups, because on an overall basis, we have a highly educated population, but at the same time, on an average, but then we have these huge extremes. And I would suggest that whatever we're doing from a measurement point of view, that we avoid either taking credit or being concerned about, you know, the average number, and be much more concerned about what are on the, we'll say, both sides of that particular average.
that's great.
Mark, this is Ray. Can I ask a question? So we're the last couple minutes we focused on post-secondary education. Is it important to measure Connecticut and the nation as a whole is in dire need of skilled trades, right? People are not getting licensed trades and very good, well-paying jobs. And the average age, I think, of an HVAC person right now is like 63 nationwide. That's a problem that the nation's facing. And should we be looking at, not college isn't for everyone, and getting people good paid, skilled trade jobs is an excellent career.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really great point. So Ray, by the way, for people who don't know, Ray leads, and I hope I get this right, Ray, you lead Mohegan Sun, right?
Actually, the Mohegan organization, but
Mohegan organization, right?
So
And so, Ray, you also, I'm sure, have viewpoints about disaggregating the data by population groups. And I'm curious, in addition to your point on the trades, if you look at kind of the native and indigenous population in the state, what are some of the kind of key concerns there that would relate to all this?
You know, I think, you know, it was an underserved population for a long time, and gaining good jobs. And I think that focusing on the underserved population is something that the state and this board should be working on and concerned with.
Yeah. Okay.
When we talk about attainment and post-secondary, it's not just degree, Ray. It's like any training. So I just dropped in the chat
Okay.
that the Lumina Foundation tracks all this stuff. And at the bottom of that page, there's this great chart that shows Connecticut attainment by race and ethnicity 2009 to 2019. So obviously not totally up to date. But I hear you. I just think we need to provide opportunities like you just described, as well as, post-secondary degree to everyone. Everyone should have a choice to decide what is the best fit for them. And my point is more just that we're really lagging in some demographic groups.
Yeah. No, I really, Jen, like the Lumina kind of, stats on that. And clearly part of it is, we have to track certificates of different kinds. That certainly, involves most of the trades have certificates. So that's a big part. I also think about labor force participation rates because, the unemployment stats, there's a lot of volatility with, but labor force participation tells you a lot more in a lot of ways. And I think about kind of figuring out how to disaggregate that, working with Department of Labor and others by different populations. So we really understand, for example, we talked about reentry a lot today. It might be that the reentry, kind of labor participation rate is likely to be about 30%, somewhere in that range from things I've read, against our average of 61, 62. So, we have a big challenge that we could kind of measure and try to figure out kind of how do we kind of, close the gap there. I wanted to kind of give, I know we have limited time, but Billy, could you kind of go through a couple of the charts related to kind of measuring the programs that we're talking about and kind of how you're thinking about that?
Absolutely, Mark. And part of it really the conversation centers around this disaggregation, as all of you have mentioned, of different subgroups. And this is really important because when we're doing impact measurement and understanding what key performance indicators are, we can look at them from a static perspective of things like oftentimes people measure employment retention rates, changes in wages, credential attainment, and changes in skills. But we really need to disaggregate again by demographics, geography, things like employment history, education level, importance, disability status, veteran status, as well as family status. And so what is important in all of this is to understand, and first we can describe things and see, okay, before and after a program, how have people changed? How have folks changed? What is the increase in, say, their income? But then at the same time, we have to understand, okay, maybe it's not the program that changed their income, maybe it's something else. And so what we're thinking, Jonathan and I, as we're working through our requests to understand, this set of metrics, we're trying to understand, is the data good enough for us to understand this right now? Can we just describe what's going on? And the thing is that we can take essentially examples and best practices, and I'm just going to go through, this is actually Jonathan's work here, but I'm just going to talk very quickly about it. Virginia has a really good model where they're actually able to do this. They actually understand and have robust enough data to compare people who have gone through skilling programs and people who have not gone through these skilling programs. And really, to sum up to Mark's point and to all your points, what they really found was that BIPOC populations were those who benefited most from these skilling programs, and that also to your points as well, I think it was Ray who said this, is not just the higher ed, is really the baseline skills and improving those baseline skills that like trade skills that matter the most and have the most return on investment.
And you might want to just put up the Colorado slide really quickly too. Because
so
Colorado has one of the best developed systems, I would say. You want to just talk to it?
Yeah, so Colorado has a really nice pipeline. What they really look at, and Jonathan, do feel free to fill in here, is they look both at the supply side and the demand side. So they look, not just, at who's getting the jobs or whatnot, but also the quality of those programs.
Right, and I wanted to point out something key with the MIT's living wage calculator. I think that is also another point that could be sort of informative to our approach to this, looking at how many people are able to reach a certain wage category and able to support themselves and their families. I think that's something that comes out of, of course, workforce investment programs or whatnot. And also on the supply side of that, Colorado especially looks at DI and A, which of course reflects our newfound purpose with the Governor's Workforce Council. And then they also look with people with disabilities in particular. And of course, their population, of course, benefits from workforce development and whatnot, as Billy pointed out too, with other studies in other states. So I think, as Mark said, Colorado is definitely the gold standard, I'd say, for looking at these types of studies. But they also have the living wage calculator, which I think could be really great to our approach to this.
So I wanted, because we're going to get pulled back in just a second, talk about the work of this committee, and Chris DiPentima and Maggie Hulse will be leading it. But what we plan on doing is actually getting our arms around and creating dashboards. So there will be a lot of really interesting work. We're going to probably have some meetings in between to really try to figure out these metrics. So I'd ask you all to kind of think about it. We'll have some committee meetings probably in between the GWC meetings, and work on some, dashboards that, as Joe said, are not overly complicated, but also do really kind of look at different populations so that we can really judge both the program level work like Career Connect, but also kind of overall how our state is doing. So I really welcome everybody's involvement in this.
I know we're going to get pulled back, but and Jan Keeney was a champion here too, but we have PSEO data now for almost 75% of our higher ed institutions. So I just want to make sure that's utilized as a research on ROI, because I think for higher ed, it's not so much a question on ROI as much as how do we support students getting through and completing and access.